Okay, so good afternoon. I'm Anto Woodiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon to try and figure out the future for smart buildings. Glad to have you with us today. Our profiles are listed on mondaylive.org, just in case you're wondering who we are. And just to make an important point that the views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. So just keep that in mind in our conversations. And please do post questions, comments, chat on the Zoom chat so we can make this as interactive as possible. Thank you very much. And in case you want any of the links that's on this slide deck, it is available on mondaylive.org as well, right there on the homepage. So this being April, we're halfway through talking about artificial intelligence. That's our theme for this month, right in the middle of the month. So it's been a great a couple of weeks so far that hoping to continue. And happy tax day, in case you didn't know, but I think we all know that by now. And so our agenda today, a normal chit chat, and then talking about AI. Really, what we want to do this week is to continue the conversations we started last week with some AI vendors. I think one or two of the people that were with us last week will be here today, and we also have Jim that's going to chime in on that conversation. And let's see where that goes, and then to have some discussions. And just a reminder, all of this is part of our sort of 3-month long sort of flow, starting in February, talking about OT. Then we move towards talking about IoT. Those are both kind of similar, obviously, but different. And the intent of all of that is that we want to get to this month talking about AI. So this is where we are. But before we get into that, hand it over to Ken for an update from your perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. We posted one at the top there on the last Monday's session, and there was a good response there. I think it's important. What we're trying to do is we kind of look through and we pull out some of the interesting points in a video clip, and I think that intrigues people to take a look at our recording and see if there's something in there that might be of interest to them. So I encourage anybody to do exactly the same thing, is to pull out your portion or somebody else's portion that kind of resonated with you. The one below that says 3 reasons to incorporate AI into your talent retention strategy. This came from Realcomm. I'm not sure that I had thought a lot about that, but if you're kind of being grumpy and saying, I'm not going to get involved in this AI stuff, it might be rumbling back through your staff, because your staff and understands that this is a change that they're all going to have to jump into. So I think that's an interesting article, and we are a media sponsor of Realcomm, so we've kind of been watching what they've been doing. The one below that is our contributing editor, Suha, and she's offering a course online, and so there's a link to that, and that's generative AI. We've been making a few changes on our site. We're quite a while back, for several months we've been on Facebook, and I know we're all LinkedIn people, but Facebook does exist, and there's a reasonable community, and the Facebook commercial has, it's been greatly improved. If you haven't looked at it for a while, it actually functions quite nicely. We've also went on. We're more featuring the automated buildings website. I've always posted as Ken Sinclair. We're now trying to transition over to automated buildings, so we have the 2 identities. We'll always have the 2 identities, but we're trying to do that. So you might want to follow it, because there's not necessarily always the same postings are happening on automated buildings. Some of them are the same, but a lot of them we're taking different perspectives. Yeah, so back to the post on Realcomm. yeah, your workers fear boredom and burnt out more than they do automation. These are some of the highlights of that presentation. And they want business technology to match their consumer experience. And generative AI still lacks human judgment. I think we all grew up in the last few years. And the last few years for me is like the last 25 years. But a lot of what we were is our knowledge of what to search on Google. And I think we're kind of transitioning into a thing is what questions to ask AI is basically our superpower. And also when we get an answer back, to understand if that answer is reasonable or not. So I don't think that any of us are going to be replaced soon by AI, but it is certainly a powerful tool. We also, my youngest daughter took a whack at the importance of data quality, and that was well received. And again, pulled out some notes from last week's session. So thank you very much, Monday Live, for generating some very current content that we can push to our people. The AI is definitely making our transition much easier. We have a hard time convincing somebody to come and read some obscure thing about one of our communication protocols. But when we mention AI, they come just to see what it's all about. So we are definitely getting bigger numbers coming through our posts. Back to you, Anto.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you. The importance of data quality, of course, for AI. Love that topic. So I actually had a couple of things. First is I saw this news over the weekend of Arduino starting to promote an education starter kit for PLCs, basically. My understanding is that Arduino released this product called what is it called? Opta, the Opta family, which is, as you can see, is kind of obviously it looks like a process control sort of DIN mounted thing. And so they're obviously thinking that there's some angle here in the industrial sector. Now, this is not buildings, I realize that. Reason of putting it up here is just to sort of highlight the big trends. And this is obviously Moore's law at work. Interesting. I don't know how well it's going to catch on, but it's very interesting. The other thing on the other side is Google, who's the laggard of the cloud providers, public cloud vendors, providers, and they're obviously trying to catch up. And they think the AI analytics and cybersecurity is kind of their main reasons for going after Microsoft and Amazon. See how that goes.
Anto, any chance that they publish the price for that little Opta product?
I was looking at that over the weekend. It's about $200.
More than I thought it would have been.
The Raspberry version with a AI processor on it that I featured a few weeks ago was $70.
Yeah, I expected this to be somewhere under 100.
Yeah.
Right, but I think this is kind of different because they've packaged it obviously to be like a different product, different kind of product. So
yeah,
that obviously adds to the cost.
Yeah, the Raspberry, I believe, was without a hat.
Yeah, no enclosure.
Yeah, and this has RS-485, and it has a whole bunch of other things. Not powerful enough for an IBB, but definitely powerful enough for other applications on the edge.
You don't think that runs Linux and so forth, or?
It runs Linux, but the processor isn't. I mean, that's what Arduino is all about. It's kind of the next level down. So it only has typically half a gig of RAM. That's not really enough.
Actually, the Raspberry, I'll dig it out while we're talking here. I'll dig out the one I had to the Raspberry because it had incredible power and incredible speed. It was definitely suited, I thought, for an IBB.
Have we put together, here's your minimum requirements for an IBB by the way?
That's work in progress. That's part of what we're
Okay.
doing.
Okay.
But it really needs that kind of Raspberry Pi level. 4 gigs is probably going to be the initial sweet spot for the IBB. All right, so we have agreed some sort of some more specifics with Realcomm about what we're going to be doing at the Realcomm in Tampa. We're still sort of buttoning up some of the details, so you'll see that in the next couple of weeks. But we have a session that's going to be covering what we're talking about here in IBB specifically on the 19th, and several other sort of sessions and several other sort of outings as part of the Realcomm IBCon. Rick, do you want to backfill that a bit with what we're doing?
Yeah, with Realcomm's focus on AI, quite timely, and C4SB's focus on being the definition of how to get data to a place where AI can do its magic. The synergies made a lot more sense as time passed, and so aligning with Realcomm as a place to tell the story of all the things we've been talking about and working on, it's sort of great timing. So stand by for more specifics, but we've got June 19th is going to be the key portion of the kickoff of our presence there at Realcomm, which is the pre-con day.
Have you decided the format, or do you already know what that is?
We do, but we'll talk about that once it's all out. But for internal purposes, we have enough for planning, and Jim Young and Howard and their team are very well aligned with what we're trying to do. So that's kind of one of the things that we've been doing the last few weeks, is just making sure the alignment is there, and it's there very strong. So very much looking forward to that. Link board as normal. I'll just leave it up there. Any other thoughts before we jump into AI?
I just thought it was apropos that one of the first messages we received is from an AI chatbot recording our session, right?
Yeah.
Yes, there you go.
I thought it was also interesting that over the weekend, anybody that was watching that little golf tournament that they had over in Augusta, about every other commercial was about AI, most of it from IBM. And it was kind of interesting to be able to see that what IBM decided to spend a lot of money to run those ads to do was to sort of educate about the importance of data, clean data, organized data, and how Watson X can help with the development of apps. I thought it was a great educational, 30 or 60 seconds. I'm thankful that IBM did the little education session for everybody there.
Cool. All right, so let's move on to AI. We're focusing obviously on vendors and what vendors are doing in this space. And what we did last week, and we're going to continue a little bit this week, is that I put up some sort of general questions about this topic, AI in buildings. I'm going to bring on, I see David Knipkamp, and I also see Keith Gibson. I'm going to bring those, David and Keith on. But they've sort of answered some of these questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Jim to just sort of maybe just go through the first 4 of these questions, which are basically the questions that we discussed last week, and then we'll continue with everyone sort of question 4 or 5 onwards. So Jim, would you mind just sort of introducing your AI perspective? I think most people know you as Mr. BACnet or Dr. No, but tell us about your AI angle.
Thanks, Anto. So my point of view is that AI is a very broad topic and very loosely defined right now. And historically, many of us have been doing AI for a long time in the form of rules-based analysis. As with most physical data, we understand physics. We understand how physics applies to systems, heat transfer. We understand those models very well. We understand the data that we can collect from building automation systems, largely HVAC controls and other things. And over a period of 30 years, people have formulated algorithms and rules-based analysis to come up with deterministic answers to questions that are out there. So we can do fault detection, diagnostic, optimization, etc. So that's historically where we have been, and my company has been involved with that for 25 years. However, with the exciting new breakthroughs and investments in large language models, other time series analysis for AI, I think the possibilities are exploding and just beginning to touch us. Along the way, we touched on using AI for other things. For instance, defining models, point naming engines, and rules for starting with a points list from a building automation system and using AI to back derive building models in buildings. So that was stuff that was being worked on probably about 10 years ago or so. And now we're seeing that blend together and seeing things get more and more powerful. So in terms of number of AIs in a building, I can't even define it that way, because most of the AI we've been using is centrally located, not distributed into different devices, where certainly pre-processing of data could be in the future. But today, most of that information is happening in cloud-based systems. Customers' understanding of the importance of data for AI, I think this is a huge topic, one that historically we called data sufficiency. And the fundamental problem is not that the customers miss their understanding of the data. It's that our antiquated engineering practices tend to value engineer all those points that we need out of systems going forward. So fundamentally, not only do we not have sensors and actuators where we would need them to do a perfect job, but we don't even have the mechanical systems in place. When we start straying over into other systems, lighting controls, building systems, metering systems, I think the sky's the limit for how that data can be applied and how AI can reinterpret that data or normalize that data or clean that data so that it can be used by other applications. But the fundamental lack of sensors and actuators that are in place is something that's very hard for us to change. So as an industry, what we've done is made do with the data that we have, used techniques like interpolation or others to fill in data that's missing that we would really like to have but don't. I think for number 3, the type of AI my company offers, I think I've largely gone through that. Basically, rules-based analysis, AI that's used in configuration, point naming, and maintenance of models. And that's where we are today. But with a very healthy understanding of even what large language models can do in terms of translation and internationalization for systems, and a lot of excitement around what time series analysis using AI will bring. And I think that our industry will not lead the charge there. Wall Street will, because people will be looking at the time series data generated by trading. And I think that because that's where the money is, that's where the breakthroughs will come first. Hopefully that kind of excitement can trickle down into our industry as well. And as for number 4, does AI have to be accurate or approximate? The answer is approximate, because everything we do is approximate. In fact, energy engineering as a field is approximate. And largely it's about, today, humans making value judgments where there's not enough information. The more information we have, and the more repeatable an item can be, the better we can get at either modeling it physically or using AI to get after it. Sorry for the long diatribe. Did I cover it, Anto?
That's perfect. Thank you, Jim. That's great. Let's pick up on that number 4, the accurate or approximate, because that we didn't discuss that last week, and that sort of came up in our planning call last Wednesday. So would love to get Keith first, maybe, because you were kind of alluding to some of this last week, and then talk about and then get David's perspective on it. Keith?
Yeah, definitely. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. I've been having mic problems with my latest download of my Windows update. But anyway, yeah, that was, I mean, Jim, that's exactly it. Like, in fact, I have to admit, like, I don't even know how our AI works. And that might sound kind of funny. But the fact is all these experts have been wrong about LLMs. They were talking about we'll never achieve AGI, we'll never have this, we'll never have that, and then suddenly we had it. So I think it's somewhat of an art as well. And Jim's like right on. We have this notion, especially when you start getting into energy, that we have to have revenue grade data. I mean, we're just trying to find an approximate trajectory, right? Where the building's going. You just have to, you don't have to be true north. You just have to, know which direction it's going near. So we don't need perfection. And one interesting thing, which I'm actually dealing with now, there's this, so we all know how AI and machine learning works. Like the more information you gather, the better the model gets, or the policy really is what it is. A policy is a mapping of the model to the IO. And so, yeah, we've been driving this chilled water for a real world example. We've been driving the KW per ton down at Cal State Dominguez Hills. And you can actually have, by trying to be too precise, you can actually have what's called overfitting of your model. And you can actually start having degradation of the results. So, I mean, we have to be careful. We're always trying to tweak this thing, and then we start doing too much, and we're trying to get too precise. And then the model starts veering off and our results are get worse and worse. So yeah, there's this concept that you can overdo it on trying to be too precise on these models, because we really don't, like a lot of this stuff, what we're doing is called imitation learning. It's a specific field around reinforcement learning. And your data model digital twin is never going to line up with the experimental data that's coming in real time. That's a huge problem. In fact, a lot of theoretically, like this is not even supposed to work, but it does. So yeah, we're really just in the infancy stages of it, and I'm just totally experimenting every day. I'm experimenting more and more to try to tweak this recipe to get this thing dialed in.
Thank you. That's great. David, what's your thoughts on this? Because the question that the reason why this sort of came up is that in a way we're all engineers, and engineers are trained to be accurate, right? And so this is kind of hurting our head in a way. So, David.
Right, it does hurt my head, but Keith is right and Jim is right. Approximation in our industry is probably what we're going to have to go after. But when we say approximation or getting near miss, is because the system changes on us. That building is changing and you can't keep up with that change, degradation, whatever it might be. So that's why I do agree with both Jim and Keith, because you're like chasing a moving target. So it doesn't fit the model where it's a fixed system, okay, where it's not moving, and I can go in there and hone in with these models, equations, and things like that. So I agree with what they said from that perspective. In our industry, because we're basically a building is kind of like a moving target. So that's why I agree with that. I show caution for the rest of our AI evangelists, because you don't want to say those words when it comes into the medical field, because they're using AI in other fields where I would say you don't want to say that. Because they're putting AI into doing diagnostics for determining, diagnoses and things like that. And you don't want to tell them, well, hey, this AI diagnosed, but they might be right. Obviously, it takes a doctor to understand what's going on. But where, again, I go a little bit deeper into that is, let's not forget about what happened in the 80s, because I saw general managers of companies saying that 5 and 6% quality was acceptable and good enough. And then what came back was the Japanese came back with 6 Sigma, a quality culture of 0 defect. and it changed everything. Now, again, there's a little bit of apples and oranges here, but we have to be very careful when we say AI and saying it's good enough or we're never going to be exact. Again, as an engineer, I got to be specific and say, I agree. It's not going to be exact in our industry, but there are other industries where I'd be very cautious in saying that because you wouldn't want to be told that if that's what's going on. So I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but I just want to exercise that caution flag. But I do agree with Jim and Keith with what they said.
And I agree with that as well. I do have a little kind of a nuanced answer, maybe not a counterpoint, but I mean, we brought this up. There was a great thread on LinkedIn, and we even touched on it last month when Anno talked about, I think we were talking about sensor faults. And if we had sensor faults, we wouldn't be able to use the data quality index. But I really have to compare this. And we got on this great thread on LinkedIn about full self-driving. Like until the FSD has 0 accidents and never makes a mistake, we will never be able to benefit from full self-driving. That's wrong, man. It just has to be slightly better than humans. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. So I would compare, like to your point about the diagnostics. My daughter right now, she's been very ill over the last 6 weeks. They don't know what the heck's wrong with her. So, I mean, do you think that, I mean, as long as the AI can do as good of a job as the doctor, because the doctor doesn't know what's wrong with her. He's just trying different regimens, different pills, try this, or it might be this. So it seems like there's more, a little bit of it's almost more human, a human response, you know, maybe that's what we have to do is kind of the AI has to get a little bit more human and a little bit, you know, experimental. Back to my point about what we're doing with the experimentation process. I don't think we want to raise the bar to where it has to be perfect or in order to be beneficial. I think we ought to keep the bar reasonable. And as long as it's better, and this is the definition of AI to my point last week, AI is just a machine taking the place of what human beings would do. So it really only has to be just a little bit better than what the human beings are doing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that with a little twist to it, which is that, you know, let's look at Chat Bot GPT and the kinds of ways that it generates text. And then look at a program like Grammarly, which is using rules-based things as well to check grammar. So we have the ability to really do both because of the critical decisions that have to be made that might be life safety decisions. Those can rely on physical models that we understand and rules that we know that provide closed-ended, traceable root cause solutions. But we can also rely on AI for directional things to get even better. But by using those physical models calibrated as they need be, we can provide closed-ended solutions most of the time where that really matters. And in other areas, we can rely on AI to advance us.
That's a good point. I just want to add to what Jim said, and I do agree with Keith. Just remember the fundamentals of learning is continuous improvement. So start where you want, I agree. But that's the fundamental thing of learning is continuous improvement.
Absolutely, yeah. And forgive me with the side smile. My customer and partner, Kenny Seaton, is here. We share this conference room. I'm actually located at Cal State Dominguez Hills, but yeah, he just flashed up the medicine screen, and we're sitting at 0.33 kW per ton, baby. So I mean, it's getting better and better. That's what really counts is the outcome of these situations. Right. 0.33 per ton, like kW per ton. That's excellent, and it's getting better and better.
I like Keith's reference there that all it needs to be is smarter than human. And one conversation I was in with my oldest daughter, and we're just talking about this, and she's being prepared for a Realcomm. And she had been listening to something, and they had made the analogy that AI is sort of like a 4-year-old child, you know, tremendous potential as to what it can learn and where it will grow to be, but it needs to be fed real good information and shaped. And I thought that was a good analogy for us to kind of get that human touch on it. And it's because it hasn't heard all of the equations and particularly the equations, we're asking it. And the knowledge is from our group. I think Keith has done some real demonstrations of how he asks questions of AI that I've found quite intriguing. So I think we
Yeah.
need to teach it. We need to teach AI. We have to, it's just treat it like a child that we need to bring into this world. And ultimately, our children will become smarter than us, definitely.
That's the point,
Without
Ken.
that.
Not, you wouldn't let the child drive to take the car until they became 16. So really, when people talk about, and a lot of people are flaming on Elon Musk right now with his FSD. Why do you think he let it go for $99 a month starting last month?
Learn.
Because he wants learning. He wants learning. Like, this guy is super smart. The more miles he drives, the more people drive, the smarter and smarter this thing's going to get. So it won't look anything like it a year from now. Like, it's going to be incredible. And then suddenly we'll have level 5 autonomy, and everybody that said it wasn't going to work, they'll just be shut up. Like, that's what you want. You want the data and you want the learning to happen.
Actually, on that,
Um,
I had the experience of being involved in the ride on an autonomous car, and we were trying absolutely everything to try and outsmart this autonomous car, and but later on, Tesla actually shut him down for several days. He got put in the penalty box for several days, and his autonomous got shut down because he was not behaving in a proper manner. So I thought that was pretty cute. So it also, brings up the whole thing that we might be able to stop road rage and drunken drivers and a whole bunch of things just automatically. Anyway, a bunch of things started rolling in my mind, but the immediate reaction is I don't want you training data, because that's not good data, because a normal person would not do that. But we did it because we're trying to figure out what the heck's it gonna do. It was like a live video game. Anyway, we digress.
So, David Wilt, you want to chime in on something?
Yeah, could I share my screen, please?
Yep, I'll stop sharing.
So, as pretty much everyone knows, I'm very involved in the Urban Land Institute in ULI and lead the data forum there. And the data forum we had last fall, we had a big focus on AI. And I thought I'd share a slide that kind of set off the discussion. And I wanted to also cue up that most, ULI members are asset holders and asset investors. And this data originally came from McKinsey, but these are industries that are exposed to AI automation. And if you look at the very top, it's office and administrative support, and you can see how LLMs would help that. And so I put little red rectangles around things that have to do with real estate. So obviously healthcare support isn't part of real estate, so we're not going to put a rectangle around there. But the very least impacted thing was building maintenance, building grounds, cleaning and maintenance. And so this seems to indicate, you're still going to need the same number of people, and AI won't really impact this. And I think this is actually where there is a big opportunity. And I think this is actually wrong, and it could be much higher in the arc here. And it's especially true, back to Jim Lee's point, if the systems had more sensors and instrumentation to allow for better remote diagnostic support and repair, that exactly also helps AI to come into play with better statistical analysis and proactive automation. And so I wanted to share that many folks don't see the opportunity for AI to make a difference here. But I think from having a foot in both camps, I think AI could make a huge impact here. But where it really comes down to decision makers, it's can this allow more assets to be supported by a fewer headcount or lower headcount? And that's where I think the driver will be for the investment to do this, because over the long term, organizations will be able to support more assets with fewer people. And as we've talked about multiple times on this call or in this forum, less people are going into the field, less people are going into maintenance, and the industry's aging out. So AI, or at least, you know, better automation that does self-diagnosis and improvement, will become more and more valuable. And I think we're at an inflection point where systems need to be designed now and going forward with a higher level of points and instrumentation in order to enable this stuff in the future. Thank you.
So David, what is, you may have said it at the beginning,
Yeah.
what is this, where does this come from? And I know it comes from ULI, but is this a research recent?
This
or-
this was stolen from McKinsey, I do believe, by another party, and I found it, and I'm like, wow, this is great. I haven't seen this before. And so what I did was I used this as a, you know, as a starting point to see, okay, in real estate, where will AI have the biggest impact?
Okay.
And actually, on the next slide, I go into it even more. Give me 1 second. But this is from an asset management overall real estate industry perspective. AI can be used to automate tons of things, auto-generated permit set. But if you notice on this list, I did not put anything about building systems operations or anything like that. Because I don't think we're anywhere close to making that a reality, considering how the industry was conditioned to have as few points as possible to make it work. And from that short-sighted system cost perspective, we're now dealing with that outcome now, where we can't really leverage the automation as much as we possibly could. Of course, there are wonderful exceptions to the rule that many folks on this call have done with their clients, but I'm making gross generalizations as per usual.
Any thoughts from others?
Well, value engineering, like that's, you know.
Which is where we're making,
Go ahead.
some of the efforts that we are undertaking is to make it more obvious that you should not value engineer out those components, because if you do, and it's so funny, look at the top, one of the top ones there is architecture and engineering.
Yep.
Used. And then where's the value engineering line where AI is being used to value engineer those points out?
Yeah.
That's where we need to focus, because
That would be right at the top, right? Potentially.
whoever
But
wrote
this is the
those
thing
lines
is,
of code
It's
needs
so
to
damn
be
sneaky.
I would
recalibrated.
put up to all of you on this call that there is a cultural change that needs to happen when it comes to system architecture. There is a culture in place, and I experienced it and fought against it at my former firms, where it's like, this is how it's done. And, you know, you don't need all those points, and you don't need this. What are you going to do with that information? Why should we keep it? Why should we even store it? You know, and just on and on and on. And I have PTSD from saying, you don't know what you're going to need it for. Why don't you just take a chance? Well, you know, so I think there needs to be a cultural change in the industry towards a higher level of instrumentation to allow things like this to happen.
But there had to have been a sense of where this was going to take us, because they had to reinforce the value of taking it out. It's like the Affordable Care Act or the Inflation Reduction Act. Like, I'm not trying to get political or anything, but come on. Like, it's not, you're diminishing value by removing this stuff. So it's almost like it's a little twist. We all know what goes on. I've been part of this industry for a long time. So yeah, I mean, you're right, David. It's like, you know, value engineering. Why did they call it that? Like, we know why they call it.
Let's just look at a basic example. what if you had a limit switch on the filter for every air handler so that you could see that the filters were being changed? If the switch didn't go once a month, you know that probably nobody changed the filter, right? If you needed to inspect the air handler every month and you put a switch on the door and the switch didn't go over a month, probably have a pretty good idea that nobody looked in there, right?
Yeah.
So these are
Well, you know
very
why they
basic
didn't
things
look
that
in
can be
there,
done.
Tim? They didn't look in there because they actually put a clock on the variable drive fan motor and they saw, oh, it only had 10 hours of use. So we didn't need to go.
Oh,
and
there
check
you
it.
go. Of course,
Sure they
David.
did. Sure they did. Of course they did.
So I'm reading the question that James Waddell put in. I'm not sure I totally understand it. So James, if you're still there, you're not still there. Oh, yes, you are. I can make you so that you're allowed to talk. Would you, if you can? I've made you so you can talk.
Well,
You
hey
there,
guys,
James?
thanks.
Hey,
I am.
hey.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Loud and clear.
In response to some of the near real-time building data that was coming in, and as a reaction to the necessity of engineering being exact, there is a methodology to be able to handle the streaming data coming from multiple building systems. I don't want to inject myself into the conversation, but it's something I think from a research perspective, it's worth taking a peek at. It's called agentic process, or basically using an AI agent that follows rules-based, which I heard a little bit later after that comment. So it's a rules-based AI agent that also uses its autonomous intelligence to be able to complete a process, offer tactical advice, or to make strategic human-approved changes to the built environment. And that's an important part of it, right? Having human-approved, at least until we all get a sense that AI is capable of doing this. But in terms of being able to look at a large amount of streaming data, GraphQL is one of the ways to do that. So you're able to parse data in near real time. And the other thing that I would add is you don't want one AI agent at a building. You want at least building floor area. And then within an area, you probably have 10 or 15 AI agents doing their thing.
Yeah.
So it was a reaction to that comment, right? It's possible. I don't think everyone's had a really good chance to dive in to find out exactly how to do that yet.
Yeah, ours at a minimum is one per piece of equipment, and then you get into a complex chiller. Like I could see us having an agent for the condensing process, the compressor, flow. Like we have multiple agents on one piece of equipment eventually, and I think we're rapidly going there. Like we're
100%.
rapidly.
That's a little like asking how many subroutines do you need in your code to handle
Exactly.
that
How many
control?
threads? Yeah, how many threads are you gonna have? And you're, so. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks, James,
Thanks,
for
James.
that. What's that word again that you said? What is it called? Agentic? Agentic?
Agentic process. It basically just means AI agent process. It's just a word that seems to be getting tossed around by the industry. Agentic process.
We learn something new on tax day every day, every year. Thank you very much, James.
Thank you.
So
Is there a
the
link
other,
you could post, James, that explains more of what you're talking? A link to the-
Yes.
That'd
Yes,
be
there
great
is.
if you
that'd be
could
good.
put that in
That'd
the
be good
chat.
if you can
I
post
met Keith and I had a great conversation a little earlier today. In fact, Keith and I just met. So probably Keith and I will be putting out some thought leadership pieces about what that exactly is.
yeah.
I'd be
You
Happy
sound
to
Right
really,
on.
we can sound real intelligent, right?
intelligent. Yeah. Real intelligent.
Artificially, of course.
No, that's a new one for me. I like it. Agentic, yeah, that's my new word.
That's an
The word-
AI-driven
word-
thesaurus right there.
Exactly.
That worked.
Exactly.
So some of the other questions that I have on my slide, I'm going to bring up again. Really sort of starting, we kind of wanted to take the conversation. I've lost my slide here. Sorry. Yeah, I'm back. Is the sort of the how do you go to market and how do you support these sort of questions number 5 and 6 and SLAs and things like that. So can we sort of spend next 10 minutes talking about basically the sort of the offering of AI? What does that look like, and how are we thinking about that? And James,
That's like an HBR case study if I ever heard one, right there.
Right. So James, I don't know if you're a vendor or not. I'm assuming you sound like you are, so maybe you can contribute to answering this question. But before that, who wants to start? Jim?
All right, I'm
Yeah.
happy to. My point of view is that we will handle support for AI offerings exactly as we do today. In fact, we have AI running throughout our products now, and you don't even know it. We don't talk about it on a regular basis. A lot of these automatic configuration devices or other things. So it will be the same, unless we're looking for some marketing hype, it will be the same offering that we have today, just better, stronger, faster, as Keith pointed out, with his algorithms converging around, or his AI converging around chiller efficiency. The results will speak for themselves. Same offering, better.
Yeah.
Keith?
I'm gonna nominate my friend and partner Tracy for this because we're working together and collaborating, particularly in the QSR fast food. But you know, I'm over here with my hair on fire with the technology, and Tracy's like, Keith, how are we gonna make some money out of this? So he's really been focusing on that. So I'm gonna nominate my friend Tracy to answer that.
Thanks, Keith. Money on my, what is it? Money on my mind, mind on my money. Yeah.
Money.
But it is a good question, right? And there isn't a single right answer when you look at this. It reminds me of the reason I mentioned the Harvard Business Review case studies. You know, going back in school, I was in competitions for case studies all the time. And there was always this go-to-market strategy question in there, right? Do you, for instance, in this case, do you advertise that you have an AI optimized, solution? Or do you use your AI as a way, behind the scenes as a way to cost reduce and be more price competitive? At what point will AI, or it's already there in some places, AI is seen as maybe a bad thing, not a good thing, right? People are starting to get a little bit funny about this whole thing. So I don't know that there is a single good go-to-market strategy for this. I think it's going to depend on the circumstances surrounding the offer that you make on that. I think right now it's hot. I think it's table stakes. People want to see that your company, your product is looking at that, utilizing that. It's kind of the measure of, are you, keeping up with the technology treadmill at this point? So it's kind of just something that we have to do. But I can see the day in the not too distant future where this becomes so diluted and so homogenized and what's the word I'm looking for? Where
Ubiquitous.
Yeah, ubiquitous, where it doesn't mean anything anymore to anyone. It's not a differentiator at that point in time. We are rapidly approaching that place. And just to add to kind of the ongoing conversation, I think there's one thing to remember about all this. The stuff that we're introducing now, 5 years from now, we're going to look back and think about, wow, that was really basic and fundamental. Look at what we're doing now. And the important point in that whole thing is our acceleration in the market, our learning curve was already, accelerating tremendously before the advent of easy to access AI. Now it's just going to go faster. I mean, what we talk about 2 years from now is going to be completely different than what we're talking about today in terms of how this is getting applied, right? A perfect example this morning, I just happened to be using Chat GPT, decided I'd try an experiment. I dropped in 10 spreadsheets from 10 QSRs, quick serve restaurants, and asked it to, calculate average consumption for all of these, pick out, different codes, and I put in a little cheat sheet on what brand was, what meter it was reading, and then stack rank all of these locations in terms of best to worst energy consumption. Literally took me 10 minutes. That was a half a day's worth of work that we did just a year ago, right, on that. So even little applications like that will build, and as I was going through it, I was already thinking of ways to cut steps out in the process. When we tie this to an API, how to automate all of that. How fast we go through this is going to be head turning, I think.
I think that's a real good point you brought up, Tracy. I hadn't really thought too much about that, but the speed of it's probably not so important what you do with AI the first time because it'll be so easy to change. And I remember Anno was talking about that in writing code, is that they would have it look at some code and fix it. And then they would ask it to fix the fix. And I think AI will, I think it's part of that learning process that Keith and I were talking about is the child learning. We basically give it a simple equation and we start doing it something we both can understand. And it'll teach us what its capabilities are. And we'll teach it a little bit about reality. And ultimately we can kind of move towards a goal.
Yeah.
But
I totally agree with that.
The speed at which we can now make mistakes is much faster.
Yes, and
which is a great thing.
Yeah, that 10 minutes, by the way, included 2 or 3 retries on my prompt and what I was asking it to do. If I were a coder, I mean, even if I were a coder, for me to go back and fix the code to do that, would have taken, way longer. Just to figure that. Instead, I said, "Oh, sorry, try this instead." It said, "Great." It actually answered, "Great idea. Let me try that." In a way,
just like talking to a person, right? That's the whole idea.
Yeah. Getting the wrong answer. Getting the wrong answer. You're asking the wrong question.
I was asking. I gave it bad instructions, right, and how to kind of differentiate between some of these spreadsheets. Once I get that cleared up, boom, came right back.
I always love iRobot as like a kind of an analogy. It's like, my responses are limited. You must ask the right question. That always stuck out with me. Just to go a little bit further on this data sufficiency, I think Jim, you mentioned that the data sufficiency. I think it's going to be the same way with AI. I'm probably not going to get a, $15 million investment from NVIDIA like some of my competition. But I don't think it's compute power here. I think it's data. I think you go wide on the data. We're getting results on a Windows 2012, R2 web server, garden variety. We don't have, 8 NVIDIA GPUs with this processing power and all that stuff. I don't think that's where it's going to be. I think we're driving, market forces are driving us in that direction because, obviously there's a benefit if compute power is really going to be the thing that separates the good AI from the not. But I don't think it's compute power. I think it's strictly man.
I would say I would add the creativity to that, Keith. Sorry, Anto. I think creativity is a key here on how this stuff gets applied and combined with others. The compute power is a non-issue. I said this on this forum before. When I worked at Intel, there was always this kind of ongoing joke about, okay, the next generation of processor we come out with, will Microsoft, OS completely use all its resources up before we even come out with it, or will we be ahead of the game for a while, right? It was always back and forth and back and forth. So I think the same thing will happen here. The processor power, the resources will work themselves out. Sorry.
All right, David, talk about go-to-market and how this is different from, or not from, your sort of previous products.
All the questions are valid and relevant. I go back to something Jim said about that switch and replacing a filter. Because what we're looking at here is taking the data to say, why do you want to change the filter? It's not, did it get changed? It's why do you want to change it? So you look at the parameters and taking the data to say, why do you want to change it to optimize the efficiency of having a person, a paid person, change a filter? Because we can say change it every month and that's good, but why do you need to change it? So we're looking at the system parameters to say, okay, why do you want to do something, and then make that process more efficient? And just like I said earlier, learning is a process of continuous improvement. Now, whether you're starting out as a four-year-old or wherever you're at, it's continuous learning. I don't care, you'd be 80 years old and you can still be learning. It just changes the whole paradigm to now, what are you learning? So what we're doing on the products is we're putting, and to go back at 2 steps, we already putting AI into our products. It's been there, we have it. The problem is we don't tell people that, because if we tell them that, they don't know how to use it. But what they do understand is, a little bit of an analogy with what Jim brought up was, we'll give you the answer, should you change the filter or not? Now that's just an example. But all the computational goes on to say, change the filter, that's what we're doing internally to say, here's the answer. Because we tell people you have all the components for AI, they don't know how to put it together. So we're putting it together for them so they can get answers, then know what to do from that answer, that response. So we've been doing AI, we have the algorithms and function blocks already there. It's just that putting them together is the challenge, because most people don't know how to put it together. So, but they do know how to ask questions like, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to do? And that's where we're coming from then, is, well, what is it you want to do? And give them that answer, with AI being the basis for providing that answer, as opposed to just data, getting data to say, well, you could do this, you could do that.
Great, thank you. Thanks, David. Jim, wondering, I was looking at the 2 questions that Mahari put up. If you can speak to them, because they seem to be more down your alley.
For some reason, I'm not seeing those. Where are they in the chat?
They're in the Q&A.
I'm just typing out a
There we go.
response to one of them too.
Go see while I read them.
Do you want to speak to that, Tracy?
Yeah, I'll verbalize what I'm saying. To the second question Mahari put there, is the fact that this is primarily data driven. And if I'm interpreting it, what he's saying correctly, basically is it the fact that we're just able to feed data to this stuff and we don't really know what's going on or need to know what's going on behind this. It totally reminds me of when handheld calculators came out. I know some of you are old enough on the call to remember that, but the big argument in the battle, my mom was a school teacher, so we had this debate. You still need to learn the math. You still need to know how to do this. My comment, though, was I don't remember the last time I did long division by hand. Right? Once it's done and it's there and it works, and we can, take the shortcut to get the right answers every time. Who cares about how we got there, right? So I think this is the direction it's going. It's going to enable mere humans to do astounding things that took, just the top tier of people to do before. So.
And just to
Yep.
answer the first question, yes, people have been doing this for years, and I think that as new technologies come in, people will take advantage of them. And the reason that you have people claiming to be the first AI is for marketing, because they think it'll stick to the wall right now. But those of us who have been around and in the industry for a long time know that largely many of these ideas have been around for 30 years, right? But let's not lose sight of the fact that that there isn't huge capital inflow and huge development of new AI technologies coming along that will have a material impact on the industry.
Yeah.
Things Keith's taking advantage of them. We are certainly, everyone is, but trying, it's an age-old marketing technique to come up with the new to try to subordinate the old. even though there might be a lot more substance and efficacy to the old. So buyer beware.
Yeah, the math behind all this has been around for, what were you saying, Rick, 100 years, 1,000 years or whatever? So,
Bayesian theory comes from 1862. Yeah, a textbook in 1862.
Okay. All right, so we should bring this to a wrap. This has been a really great conversation. Thank you, Keith, David, and others that's helped us, James, and great conversation. We'll get a video up by tomorrow-ish, and we'll be back next week. We're going to continue on the AI. Next week, we're going to sort of be talking about the sort of the IP side of things. We're going to have a lawyer on the show. So
Who might that be?
I don't know, some IP lawyer that I happen to know. All right. So have a great week, everyone, and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
yeah.